Her husband's twin daughters lived one street away. For 7 years, Bernice Hudson waved at them, two little girls with his amber eyes and his dimples, never knowing they were his. Her own cousin was raising them, the cousin who'd sent 47 emails begging him to acknowledge his children, the cousin he'd had lawyers threaten into silence. And when Daryl married Bernice, 3 years after abandoning those babies, he never said a word. Not until a Tuesday afternoon, when their laughter, that synchronized sound only twins make, stopped Bernice cold on the sidewalk, and she finally saw what had been hidden in plain sight all along. It was a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary Tuesday that makes you forget life can change in seconds. 72 degrees, clear sky. The smell of fabric softener still clinging to the dry cleaning draped over Bernice's arm as she walked down Hawthorne Lane toward number 47. Her house. The house she'd lived in for 7 years with Daryl Martin. A man whose name appeared in Forbes, whose business deals closed in boardrooms most people would never see, whose reputation was as spotless as the marble floors in their foyer. 7 years of mornings, that looked the same. Identical brick houses lined up like dominoes, trimmed hedges, polite waves, the kind of street where nothing shocking ever happened, because everyone worked very hard to make sure it didn't. Bernice had her keys in one hand, dry cleaning in the other, already thinking about what to start for dinner, when she heard it. Laughter, not just any laughter. The kind that echoed, harmonized. Two voices so perfectly synchronized, they sounded like one voice split in half. Her chest tightened before her brain could explain why. She stopped walking. Right there on the sidewalk, 3 houses from her own, because something about that sound reached inside her and squeezed. The keys slipped from her hand, clattered on the concrete. She didn't pick them up. When she looked across the street, she saw them, 2 girls, maybe 10 years old, standing in the front yard of number 52. Identical in a way that went far beyond shared faces. Same height, same build, same braids tied with yellow ribbons that caught the afternoon light. Same cautious smiles that pulled at the corners of their mouths, like they'd learned early not to trust joy completely. Same dimples, deep ones, the kind that carved parentheses into their cheeks when they laughed. Bernice knew those dimples. She saw them every morning across the breakfast table. But it was the eyes that stopped her heart. Daryl's eyes. Not similar eyes. Not sort of like his eyes. Identical. The same amber flecks that shifted between brown and gold, depending on the light. The same slight downturn at the outer corners that made him look sad, even when he smiled. Bernice stood there, dry cleaning sliding off her arm onto the sidewalk, staring at 2 children who had her husband's face. A woman stepped into view, calling. The girls inside. Voice sharp, urgent. "Rita! Alma, come in, now!" Bernice's blood turned cold. She knew that voice. Judy Hudson, her cousin. The same cousin she hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Not since the family reunion that ended with slammed doors and things said that couldn't be unsaid. Judy, who'd always been guarded, private, the kind of person who answered questions with half-truths and changed subjects when anyone got too close. Judy, who had moved to Hawthorne Lane 5 years ago, 1 street over from Bernice, and never mentioned it. The girls glanced toward Bernice before disappearing into the house. One of them, Rita, the one with a small scar above her eyebrow, locked eyes with her for just a second. Then the door closed. Bernice couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world had tilted sideways, and she was still trying to figure out which way was up. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Daryl. "Running late. Don't wait for me for dinner." Her hands started shaking. That night, Bernice watched her husband the way you watch a stranger, studying him, searching for cracks in a mask she'd never realized he was wearing. He came home at 8:43, loosened his tie, kissed her forehead the same way he always did, quick, distracted, already thinking about something else. "How was your day?" he asked, heading toward the kitchen. Bernice followed. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Fine. Ran errands. Picked up the dry cleaning." She paused, watched his back as he opened the fridge. Saw some neighbors. Kids playing outside. His shoulders stiffened, just for a second, so brief she almost missed it. "That's nice," he said. Didn't turn around. Bernice's heart pounded against her ribs. "I think Judy lives one street over." The fork in his hand paused midair, hovering above the leftover pasta he'd pulled from the fridge. Then he recovered. Smooth. Too smooth. "Oh." He set the fork down, finally turned to face her. His expression was perfectly neutral. "That's interesting. Small world." "Yeah," Bernice said quietly. "Small world." He held her gaze for 3 seconds, then smiled. The same smile he used with investors. Charming, empty. "I have some calls to make. Eat without me." And just like that, he was gone. Up the stairs, into his office. Door closed. Bernice stood alone in the kitchen, the sound of identical laughter still echoing in her head, and realized she was married to a man she didn't know at all. She didn't sleep. 2 in the morning found her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at Daryl's face in the dark. He slept on his back, peaceful, like a man with nothing to hide. You know that feeling when your gut tells you something's wrong, but your mind hasn't caught up yet? When reality shifts under your feet and you're still trying to find solid ground? That's where Bernice was, suspended between what she knew and what she feared. And if you're here because you value stories about women who refuse to ignore their intuition, who dig until they find truth, even when it terrifies them, this channel is your space. We share these stories every week because women like Bernice deserve to have their experiences witnessed. Women who choose truth over comfort. Women who ask the questions everyone else is too afraid to ask. Bernice whispered into the darkness, so quiet Daryl didn't stir. "Who are you?" He didn't answer, just kept sleeping, the way innocent people sleep. But Bernice knew better now. She'd seen those eyes, those dimples, that face reflected in 2 little girls who shared her husband's DNA and lived one street away with a cousin who disappeared from her life 5 years ago without explanation. The math was starting to add up, and the sum was destroying her. By sunrise, Bernice had made a decision. She waited until Daryl left for work, watched from the upstairs window as his black Mercedes pulled out of the driveway at exactly 7:15, the way it did every morning. Routine, predictable, the illusion of a man with nothing to hide. But Bernice wasn't watching her husband anymore. She was watching number 52. At 8:47, the front door opened. Judy stepped out first, then the 2 girls, both wearing backpacks, one pink, one purple. They walked to the end of the driveway where the school bus would stop. Judy's hand rested on the shoulder of the girl with the scar, protective, the way mothers touch their children. The girl without the scar glanced back at Bernice's house, like she knew someone was watching, like she'd felt eyes on her before. Then the bus came. Yellow, loud, normal. The girls climbed on. Judy waited until the bus turned the corner before going back inside. Bernice grabbed her keys. She was crossing the street before she could talk herself out of it. The walk from number 47 to number 52 took 30 seconds. It felt like crossing into another country. Bernice stood on Judy's porch, fist raised to knock, and realized she had no idea what she was going to say. No plan, no script. Just a question that had burned through her entire night and wouldn't let her rest. She knocked. Footsteps inside. Slow, deliberate. Like someone walking towards something they'd been dreading. The door opened. Judy stood there in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, hair pulled back, face bare of makeup. She looked older than Bernice remembered. Tired. Like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. Their eyes met, and Judy said the 5 words that confirmed everything. "I was wondering when you'd come." Not surprise, not confusion. Just resignation. Like she'd been waiting for this moment for years. Bernice's voice came out hoarse. "How long?" Judy's shoulders sagged. She stepped aside, opened the door wider. "Come in." The living room was modest, lived in. Nothing like the carefully curated spaces in Bernice's house. This room had marks on the walls from furniture moved and moved again. Crayon drawings taped to the fridge. 2 backpacks by the door, pink and purple, with names stitched on the tags in careful, uneven lettering. Rita. Alma. Bernice didn't sit down. Couldn't. Her legs wouldn't bend. She just stood there, staring at those names, while Judy moved around the kitchen, making coffee neither of them would drink. "How long?" Bernice asked again. Judy's hands trembled as she poured. Coffee splashed on the counter. She didn't wipe it up. 10 years. The words knocked the air from Bernice's lungs. 10 years. She did the math in her head. Fast. Desperate. 10 years ago, she hadn't even met Daryl yet. 10 years ago, she was still working at the marketing firm downtown. Still dating that guy whose name she could barely remember now. Still thinking her life would be ordinary. "Tell me everything," Bernice said. Not a request. A demand. Judy finally turned around. Her eyes were red. "I was working temp jobs. Daryl's company needed someone to organize files for one of his smaller projects, some shell company he used for real estate deals. I was there for 6 weeks. She sat down at the kitchen table. Bernice remained standing. He was different then. Or maybe I just wanted to believe he was. We'd talk during breaks. He'd ask about my day like he actually cared. One night we both worked late, and he offered to buy me dinner. It wasn't supposed to be anything serious. Bernice's fingernails dug into her palms. But it happened more than once, Judy continued. 3 months. That's all it was. 3 months of late nights and promises to talk about where it was going. And then he just stopped. Calls went to voicemail. Emails bounced back. The project ended, and I never saw him again. And you were pregnant, Judy nodded. I found out 2 weeks after he disappeared. I tried everything to reach him. I sent 47 emails. I know because I counted every single one. I called 23 times. Every call got redirected to some lawyer who told me Mr. Martin wasn't available, and if I persisted, they'd consider it harassment. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. I didn't want his money, Judy said, and her voice broke. I just wanted him to know they existed. That's all. Just to know he had daughters. 2 daughters who would grow up wondering why their father never cared enough to find them. Silence filled the space between them. Heavy, suffocating. Bernice finally sat down. Her legs gave out, and the chair caught her. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Judy laughed, a broken sound. "When? At your engagement party? At your wedding? Was I supposed to walk up to you in your white dress and say, 'Hey, congratulations, by the way. Your husband is my children's father?'" "Yes." The word came out fierce, angry. "Yes, you should have told me." Judy's eyes filled with tears. "Would you have believed me? Or would you have believed him?" The successful billionaire versus the struggling Single mother with an axe to grind? Bernice opened her mouth, closed it, because she didn't know, and that not knowing felt like swallowing glass. When you got married, Judy said quietly, I made a decision. I moved here, one street over, close enough that he'd see us, if he ever bothered to look. Far enough that it wouldn't be obvious. I wanted him to see what he walked away from, every single day. I wanted him to pass us on the street and have to look his daughters in the face and remember what he did. Did he? Bernice asked. Did he ever see them? I don't know. Judy wiped her eyes. If he did, he never said anything, never came to the door, never asked. Maybe he didn't recognize them. Maybe he didn't want to. Bernice thought about all the times Darryl left for work, all the mornings he walked to his car, all the evenings he came home. Had he seen them? Had he known? They don't know, Judy said suddenly, urgent. Rita and Alma. They don't know who he is. They know Mr. Martin lives nearby. They know Miss Bernice sometimes waves at them, but they don't know, and I don't know how to tell them. Bernice's phone buzzed, a text from Darryl. Lunch today? Her stomach turned. I have to go, she said, standing up too fast. The room spun. Bernice, I need time. I can't. She was at the door, hand on the knob. Judy's voice stopped her. I'm sorry, for everything, for not telling you, for moving here, for all of it. But I'm not sorry they exist. Whatever he did, whatever we did, Rita and Alma are the only good thing that came from it, and they deserve better than this. Bernice didn't turn around. We all do, she whispered. Then she left, crossed back to number 47. Back to the house she shared with a man who'd been lying to her since the day they met. She stood in her pristine kitchen with its marble countertops and designer fixtures, and thought about the modest living room across the street with crayon drawings on the fridge and 2 backpacks by the door, pink and purple. Rita and Alma, her husband's daughters. Her stomach lurched. She made it to the bathroom just in time. When she finally looked up, her reflection stared back from the mirror, face pale, eyes red. A woman who'd woken up that morning thinking she knew her life and would end the day realizing she'd been living in a stranger's house. Her phone buzzed again. Darryl. Where do you want to eat? She typed back. Home. We need to talk. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Okay. 1 word. But Bernice heard the lie in it, the careful calculation. He knew. Of course he knew. You don't hide something that big without always being ready for the moment it surfaces. That night at dinner, Darryl did something he never did. He lied, and Bernice knew it. Bernice didn't sleep that night. And by sunrise, she'd made a decision that would unravel 10 years of lies. The alarm went off at 6:30. Darryl's hand reached across the bed, slapping it silent. Same motion he made every morning, mechanical, practiced. But this morning, Bernice was already awake, had been for hours, watching him sleep, watching the way his chest rose and fell, the way his fingers twitched in his dreams, trying to find the stranger hiding inside the man she'd married. He opened his eyes, found her staring at him. Morning, he said, voice rough with sleep. Normal. Morning. She waited for it, the crack, the tell, something in his face that would give him away. But there was nothing, just Darryl, rolling out of bed, stretching, padding toward the bathroom, the same routine he'd followed for 7 years. Except now, Bernice knew what routine really meant. It meant practice. It meant doing something so many times, you could fake it, even when everything inside you was screaming. She followed him downstairs, watched him pour his coffee. Black, no sugar. 2 sips before he checked his phone. He always checked his phone. But today, she watched his eyes. The way they scanned the screen, the micro-expression that flickered across his face when he read something. Was it relief? Anxiety? Guilt? Busy day? She asked. The usual. He didn't look up. Might be late tonight. Conference call with Tokyo. What time? His eyes flicked to her. Just for a second. Calculating. 7. Maybe 8. Okay. She poured her own coffee, hands steady, voice calm, playing the role of the trusting wife because that's what he expected. That's what he needed her to be. He kissed her forehead on his way out. 7:15, right on schedule. Bernice stood at the window, watched his Mercedes pull out of the driveway, watched it turn left at the corner, away from Judy's street. But did he look? Did he glance in his rearview mirror toward number 52? She couldn't tell. Pay attention to what she does next. This is important. Bernice grabbed her phone, texted her volunteer coordinator. So sorry, family emergency. Can't make it today. Then she positioned herself at the upstairs window, the one with the best view of number 52. And she waited. At 8:47, the same time as yesterday, Judy's front door opened. The twins appeared first. Rita, in a blue t-shirt. Alma, in green. Both with their backpacks. Both with their hair. In the same braids they'd worn yesterday, but with red ribbons this time, instead of yellow. Judy followed them out, hand on Rita's shoulder. The protective gesture mothers make without thinking. They walked to the end of the driveway. Stood at the bus stop. Judy said something that made Alma laugh. That synchronized laugh that had started all of this. Bernice grabbed her keys. She stayed 3 cars back. Far enough not to be obvious. Close enough not to lose them. The yellow bus made 5 stops before it pulled into Oak Ridge Elementary. Bernice knew the school. Had driven past it 100 times without ever thinking about who attended. Without knowing that her husband's daughters walked these halls every day. She waited until the bus unloaded. Watched the twins disappear through the double doors with dozens of other children. Then she parked. The main office was exactly where it always was in schools like this. Right inside the entrance. Visible. Accessible. Decorated with student artwork and attendance awards. The door squeaked when Bernice pushed it open. Loud enough to make the receptionist look up from her computer. Good morning. The woman was 50s. Floral blouse. Reading glasses on a chain. The smell of her perfume, something heavy and sweet, filled the small space. How can I help you? Bernice's heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice came out smooth. Practiced. Hi, I'm visiting family in the area. My cousin's girls go here, Rita and Alma Martin. I wanted to drop off some books for them, but I realized I don't know their teacher's name. The receptionist's face lit up. Oh, Rita and Alma. Such sweet girls. They're in Mrs. Patterson's class. 5th grade. Room 214. Martin. She'd said Martin without hesitation. The twins used Daryl's last name. Their mother, Judy, is so involved, the receptionist continued, clicking through something on her computer. Always volunteering. Such a lovely family. Do you need me to sign them out, or? Bernice let the question hang. Oh no. You can just leave the books here, and we'll make sure they get them. Unless you want to wait until lunch, you could see them in the cafeteria? Actually, I was hoping to get some photos for the family album. Do you have any from previous years? I've missed so much living out of state. The receptionist hesitated. Well, normally we don't. I completely understand. Bernice pulled out her phone. I can show you my ID. Judy's my cousin. I just want to put together something special for their birthday. Something in Bernice's face must have been convincing. Or maybe it was the desperation that leaked through despite her best efforts, because the receptionist smiled. Let me see what I can pull up, just between us. She turned back to her computer, typed, clicked. Then the printer whirred to life. Here we go. School photos from the past few years. She handed Bernice a stack of pages, still warm from the printer. The weight of that file folder in Bernice's hands felt like holding evidence at a crime scene. "Thank you so much," Bernice whispered. "Of course. Tell Judy we said hello." Bernice made it to her car before her hands started shaking. So hard the pages rustled. She spread them across the passenger seat. 5 years of school photos. Rita and Alma at ages 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Kindergarten. 2 tiny girls with gap-toothed smiles and nervous eyes. First grade, a little more confident, holding hands in the photo. Second grade, Alma had gotten glasses. Rita had a small scar above her eyebrow. Third grade, both smiling wider, more comfortable, growing into themselves. Fourth grade, starting to look less like babies and more like the girls Bernice had seen yesterday. Fifth grade, this year, the current photo, 10 years old, beautiful, unmistakably Daryl's daughters. Bernice did the math. Fast, desperate. They were 10, which meant they were born. She counted back, 11 years ago, give or take. She'd met Daryl 10 years ago, at that charity gala. He'd been charming, successful, available. He'd told her he'd just gotten out of a relationship, that he was ready for something real. He'd been lying from the very first conversation. There's something powerful about a woman who refuses to be gaslit, who trusts what she sees over what she's told. Every week on this channel, we tell stories about women who chose truth over comfort. And if that resonates with you, if you've ever had to choose between peace and honesty, hit that subscribe button, because you're not alone in this. None of us are. Bernice pulled up the school's database on her phone. Emergency contacts for Rita and Alma Martin. Mother, Judy Hudson. 2. Phone numbers listed. Father, blank. Medical decisions, mother only. Pickup authorization. Mother, grandmother, deceased as of 3 years ago, and one other name, Bernice Martin. She almost dropped the phone. Her name was on their emergency contact list. Had been for how long? Since she married Daryl? Since Judy moved to Hawthorne Lane? Who had put it there? Judy? As some kind of insurance? Some desperate hope that if something happened, Bernice would help? Or had it been there all along, a breadcrumb waiting to be found? But there was something else in those records, something that made no sense. A note in the medical section. Twins, born premature at 32 weeks. Father, Daryl James Martin. Birth certificates on file. Birth certificates with Daryl's full name. Legal documents that proved what he'd spent a decade trying to hide. Everything she thought she knew was a carefully constructed lie. Bernice sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, just breathing, trying to process what it meant that legal documents existed with her husband's name on them. That somewhere in a government office, there was proof that couldn't be denied or explained away. The birth certificates she'd find later would break her completely. But first, she needed to see them with her own eyes. She drove to the county records office. The building was gray, institutional, the kind of place where the truth lived in filing cabinets and database entries. The clerk was younger than Bernice expected, maybe 25, bored expression, name tag that said Kevin. I need copies of birth certificates, Bernice said. Rita and Alma Martin, born 11 years ago. Relationship to the minors? Bernice hesitated. Family. I need something more specific. Stepmother. The word tasted like acid. Kevin typed, clicked, frowned. I can pull them up, but you'll need to provide ID and sign a release form. Fine. 10 minutes later, She held 2 certified copies, heavy paper, official seals, undeniable. Certificate of live birth, State of California. Child's name, Rita Marie Martin. Date of birth, 11 years ago. Mother, Judy Elizabeth Hudson. Father, Darrell James Martin. Certificate of live birth, State of California. Child's name, Alma Rose Martin. Date of birth, 11 years ago. Mother, Judy Elizabeth Hudson. Father, Darrell James Martin. There it was, black ink on white paper, the truth that couldn't be spun or managed or explained away. Bernice sat in her car outside the county records office, the papers on her lap, the proof in her hands. Her phone felt heavy when she picked it up. She scrolled through her contacts, found her sister, the lawyer, the one who'd always told her to get a prenup, the one who'd said Darrell seemed too good to be true. She'd been right. Bernice hit dial. 3 rings. Hey, Bernice, what's up? I need you to pull every document filed under Darrell Martin's name. Everything. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, property records, business filings, everything. Silence on the other end. Then, what did he do? Bernice looked at the birth certificates, at her husband's name, typed in careful letters next to 2 daughters he'd never acknowledged. He's been lying to me since the day we met, and I need to know how deep it goes. I'll call you back in an hour. The line went dead. Bernice sat there, engine off, windows up, holding proof of betrayal in her hands. And somewhere across town, Darrell was in a meeting, shaking hands, making deals, playing the role of the successful businessman with nothing to hide. But she had the truth now, and the truth was about to destroy everything. Wednesday morning, 9:15 a.m. Bernice crossed the street and knocked on her cousin's door, and Judy said the 5 words that changed everything. I was wondering when you'd come. Not Bernice, what a surprise. Not, is everything okay? Just those 5 words. Resignation, wrapped in inevitability. Like she'd been waiting for this knock for years. Judy stood in the doorway wearing the same exhausted expression she'd worn 2 days ago. Sweatpants, oversized cardigan, hair pulled back in a messy bun. But her eyes were different today. Red-rimmed, swollen, like she'd been crying, or like she'd been expecting to cry. Come in, Judy said quietly, stepped aside. Bernice walked into number 52 for the second time. But this time, she saw everything differently. The living room was small, modest, nothing like the carefully designed spaces in her own home. The couch was worn at the corners. The coffee table had water rings from years of forgotten drinks. But it was lived in. Real. 2 pink and purple backpacks sat by the door. Names stitched on the tags in careful, uneven letters that looked hand-sewn. Rita. Alma. Photos covered every wall. The twins at every age. Newborns with tiny fists. Toddlers covered in birthday cake. First day of kindergarten. Missing teeth. Halloween costumes. Christmas mornings. Soccer games. Dance. Recitals. A complete childhood documented in frames. But there was no father in any of the pictures. Every photo showed Judy and the girls. Sometimes a grandmother. Never Darrell. Like he'd been erased from their history before he ever entered it. Afternoon light filtered through lace curtains, casting patterns on the hardwood floor. Somewhere outside, children laughed. A dog barked. Life continued, normal and unchanged, while inside this house, 2 women prepared to tear open wounds that had never properly healed. Judy moved to the kitchen, hands trembling as she pulled down 2 mugs, poured coffee from a pot that looked hours old. Neither of them would drink it. They both knew that. But the ritual gave her something to do with her hands. How long? Bernice asked, standing in the middle of the living room because sitting down felt like accepting this, making it real. Judy's back was to her, shoulders hunched. The coffee cup shook in her hand. 10 years, she whispered. The same answer as before. But this time, Bernice had come armed with proof. Birth certificates in her purse. School records. The paper trail Daryl thought he'd escaped. Tell me everything, Bernice said. From the beginning, and don't leave anything out. Judy finally turned around, set the cups on the table, sat down heavily, like her bones couldn't hold her weight anymore. I was working temp jobs 11 years ago, jumping from company to company, just trying to pay rent. One of Daryl's shell companies needed someone to organize files for a real estate project. 6 weeks of work, decent pay. I took it. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, seeking warmth from something already going cold. He'd come by the office late, after everyone else left. We'd talk. He seemed different than the other executives. Like he actually saw me as a person, instead of just the temp. He'd ask about my day, my dreams, what I wanted to do with my life. Bernice's jaw tightened. She knew that version of Daryl, charming, attentive, the man who made you feel like the only person in the room. It was a performance. She understood that now. It started with dinners, after late nights at the office, Judy continued. Then drinks, then more. 3 months. That's all it lasted. 3 months of him saying we needed to talk about where this was going. 3 months of promises to make time, to figure things out, to see if this could be something real. Her voice cracked. And then the project ended. And he was just gone. Now here's what you need to understand about Judy's choice. She wasn't trying to trap him, wasn't scheming for money or status. She was a 28-year-old woman who thought she'd found someone who cared, who believed the promises whispered in dark rooms by a man who made promises for a living. His number went straight to voicemail, Judy said. Emails bounced back with auto responses. I thought maybe he was traveling, busy. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, because that's what you do when you think someone cares about you. She laughed, bitter, broken. 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant, with twins. Bernice's hands clenched into fists. I tried everything to reach him. I sent 47 emails. I counted every single one. I called 23 times. Every call got redirected to some lawyer who told me Mr. Martin wasn't available. That if I persisted in trying to contact him, they'd consider it harassment and take legal action. They threatened you. They didn't have to threaten explicitly. The message was clear. Go away. You're not worth his time. You're not worth acknowledgement. You're certainly not worth child support or even a conversation. Judy's voice broke completely then, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want his money, she said, the words spilling out, desperate and raw. I didn't want anything from him, except for him to know they existed. That's all. Just to know that Rita and Alma were his daughters, that they were real, that they mattered. But he never came. Bernice thought about all the years she'd known Daryl. 7 years of marriage. 3 years of dating before that. 10 years total. The same 10 years Judy had been raising his children alone. The same 10 years he'd never mentioned daughters. Never mentioned Judy. Never mentioned that he'd abandoned 2 little girls who carried his DNA and his last name. When did you find out about me? Bernice asked quietly. Judy wiped her eyes. I saw the engagement announcement in the business section 4 years after the girls were born. Billionaire investor, Daryl Martin, to wed marketing executive Bernice Hudson. There was a photo. You looked so happy. I was. I know. That's why I didn't say anything. You should have. The words came out harder than Bernice intended. Judy flinched. You could have told me, Bernice said. At the engagement party. At the wedding. Anytime in the past 7 years. Judy met her eyes. Would you Have believed me? Or would you have believed your billionaire husband? The successful, charming man everyone admires versus the struggling single mother with an axe to grind? The question hung in the air like smoke. Bernice opened her mouth, closed it. Because she wanted to say yes, of course she would have believed Judy. But would she? Really? If her cousin, estranged after a family fight, had shown up at her wedding with accusations about Daryl, would she have believed her? Or would she have thought Judy was jealous? Bitter? Trying to ruin her happiness? She didn't know, and that not knowing felt like betraying herself. I would have believed you, Bernice finally said. Needed to believe it was true. Judy's face crumpled. That's what scares me, because I didn't give you the chance. Silence filled the space between them, heavy with years of missed opportunities and choices that couldn't be undone. When you got married, Judy said after a long moment, I made a decision. Maybe it was crazy. Maybe it was cruel, but I couldn't keep running, couldn't keep hiding. So I moved here, one street over from your perfect house with your perfect husband. Why? Because I wanted him to see what he abandoned. Every single day. Judy's voice turned hard, sharp with anger that had been simmering for a decade. I wanted him to drive past us, to see the girls growing up, to have to look at his daughters and remember what he did, what he chose not to do. Did he? Bernice asked. Did he ever see them? I don't know. If he did, he never came to the door, never asked, never acknowledged them. Maybe he saw them and didn't recognize them. Maybe he saw them and chose to look away. I don't know which would be worse. Bernice thought about all the mornings Daryl left for work, all the evenings he came home, all the times he'd walked past number 52 without mentioning that his daughters lived there, without mentioning anything at all. The level of denial required to maintain that secret. The daily choice to look away, to pretend, to lie by omission every single day for 5 years. But what Judy didn't tell Bernice would surface during the confrontation with Daryl, because there were still pieces missing, still questions unanswered. And in that moment, Bernice realized she'd lost 2 families, the one she thought she had, and the one she never knew existed. What happens now? Judy asked, voice small, afraid. Now I go home and have a conversation with my husband, and he's going to tell me the truth, all of it. Bernice, they deserve better than this, Bernice said, gesturing to the photos on the wall. Rita and Alma. They deserve a father who acknowledges them, and you deserve an apology that's about a decade overdue. I don't need an apology. Yes, you do, and so do I. Bernice stood up. The coffee sat untouched on the table, cold now, forgotten. She was halfway to the door when Judy spoke again. I'm sorry for not telling you. For moving here. For all of it. Bernice turned back. Are you sorry they exist? God, no. Never. Then that's the only part that matters. She left. Crossed the street back to number 47. Back to the house that suddenly felt like a museum of lies. Every room, a carefully constructed set, where Daryl played the role of faithful husband, and she played the role of trusting wife. But the performance was over. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. Text from Daryl. Where are you? We need to talk. Her blood went cold. He knew. Somehow, he knew she'd gone to Judy's. Knew she'd found out. Maybe he'd driven by and seen her car. Maybe someone had told him. Or maybe he'd just been waiting for this moment, preparing for it, rehearsing his lines for when his past finally caught up with him. Bernice typed back, Home. Come now. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. On my way. 2 words, but she heard the lie in them. The careful calculation. The man who'd spent 10 years hiding was about to spend the next hour trying to explain. And Bernice, who'd spent 7 years trusting, was done accepting explanations. She wanted the truth, and she was going to get it. When Bernice came home, all the lights were off except one. Darryl sat in his study, and for the first time in 7 years, he looked small. Not the billionaire investor who commanded boardrooms. Not the man whose name appeared in financial journals. Just a man, shoulders hunched, face buried in his hands, sitting in the dark like he was trying to disappear into it. Bernice stood in the doorway, silent, watching him the way you watch a stranger. Because that's what he was now. A stranger who'd been sleeping in her bed for 7 years while keeping secrets that could fill the distance between them. He must have heard her, must have felt her presence, because his hands dropped, his head lifted, and when their eyes met, she saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. "I know about Rita and Alma," he said. "Not let me explain. Not, it's not what you think." Just those 6 words. An admission. A surrender. Bernice crossed her arms, leaned against the doorframe. She didn't trust herself to get closer. Didn't trust what her hands might do if they could reach him. "Tell me everything," she said. Voice flat, empty of emotion, because if she let any feeling in, the dam would break and she'd drown in it. Darryl stood up, moved to pour himself a drink. Whiskey. Neat. His hands shook as he lifted the glass. He didn't offer her one. They both knew she wouldn't take it. "I knew Judy was pregnant," he said. Couldn't look at her. Stared into his glass instead. "She told me. Sent me an email with the ultrasound attached. Twins. I could see them on the screen. 2 little shapes that would become people. And I panicked." He said it so simply. Like panic was an excuse. Like fear justified abandonment. "I let the lawyers handle it. Told them to make it go away. Not the pregnancy. I knew I couldn't do that. But the connection, the obligation, the complication. I thought if I could just not engage, it would somehow be less real." Bernice laughed. A sharp cutting sound. "Less real? They're children. Your children. How do you make that less real?" "I know." His voice cracked. "I know how it sounds. I know what I am. But I was building the company. We were in the middle of a merger. I told myself I'd deal with it later, when things calmed down, when I had time. And then later never came. By the time I decided I should probably reach out, see if there was some kind of arrangement we could make, Judy had disappeared, changed her number, moved, went completely silent." He took a long drink. Dutch courage. "I hired investigators," he said. "Good ones for 3 years. They couldn't find her. She'd covered her tracks completely. And after 3 years of nothing, I let myself believe maybe it was for the best. Maybe she'd found someone else. Maybe the girls thought some other man was their father. Maybe I'd dodged a bullet." The casual cruelty of that statement, treating his daughters like a bullet to dodge, made Bernice's stomach turn. "They were 1 street away," she said quietly. "For 5 years. They were 1 street away, and you never found them, because you never looked close enough." Darryl's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "What?" "Judy moved here 5 years ago, to Hawthorne Lane, 1 street over. Your investigators couldn't find her because she was in plain sight, because you never thought to look in your own neighborhood." The color drained from his face. He set the glass down, gripped the edge of his desk like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I see them sometimes," he whispered. "At the bus stop, walking to school, playing in the yard. I don't know what I thought, that they looked familiar, that there was something about them. But I never put it together. Or you did, and chose not to. He didn't deny it. Bernice didn't scream, didn't throw things, didn't cry. Silence was worse. It was the sound of a marriage cracking, the sound of trust dying, the sound of every moment they'd shared, being rewritten with the truth underneath. "Do they know?" Daryl asked. "Rita and Alma, do they know I'm their father?" "Not yet, but they will, because Judy can't keep hiding it, and you don't get to keep pretending they don't exist." "I'm not pretending." "Yes, you are." The words exploded out of her. "You've been pretending for 11 years, pretending Judy was some temp worker you barely remember, pretending you don't have daughters, pretending that ignoring something makes it go away." Daryl sank back into his chair, covered his face with his hands. But what he said next made Bernice question everything. "I was relieved," he admitted, voice muffled behind his palms. "When the investigators couldn't find them. When it seemed like maybe they were just gone from my life. I was relieved, because I didn't know how to face what I'd done. How to explain to them that their father knew they existed and chose not to be there. How to look at them and see all the birthdays I missed. All the moments I should have been there for." He dropped his hands, looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm a coward, Bernice. Not a monster, just a coward who let fear make his decisions. And somehow that was worse. Because monsters you could hate cleanly. But cowards? Cowards were complicated. Cowards were human. Cowards were the kind of villain that made you understand how good people did terrible things. Sometimes the hardest truth isn't about what people did. It's about what they didn't do. The courage they couldn't find. The moments they let pass. If you're watching this because you believe in the messy, complicated reality of how families fall apart and might, just might, find their way back together, then you're in the right place. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had to face a truth you'd been running from? Because sharing these stories is how we remind each other we're not alone in the hard parts. "Do you want to know them now?" Bernice asked, the question that would determine everything. Daryl looked at her, then away, then down at his hands. The hands that signed million-dollar deals, but had never held his daughters. "I don't know if I deserve to." "This isn't about what you deserve," Bernice said, each word sharp, precise. "This is about what Rita and Alma deserve. And they deserve a father who shows up, even if he's late, even if he's scared, even if he doesn't know how. What if they hate me? They probably will, at first. You've earned that." He flinched. "But maybe, if you actually try. If you stop running and start facing what you've done, they might give you a chance. Not because you deserve it, but because children are more forgiving than adults. Because they still believe people can change." What would you do in Bernice's position? Finding out your husband had secret children, that your cousin had been carrying that burden alone, that everyone in your life had been keeping secrets that reshaped reality. Would you leave? Stay? Fight? Forgive? There's no right answer, just the answer that lets you sleep at night. "I don't know how to do this," Daryl said. "How to suddenly be a father to 10-year-old girls who don't know me. Neither does Judy. Neither do I. But we're going to figure it out, because the alternative is letting those girls grow up thinking their father saw them every day and chose to stay a stranger." Bernice walked to the window, looked out toward Judy's house. The lights were on, number 52 glowing in the darkness. She could see shadows moving behind the curtains. Judy and the twins. A family that had survived without Daryl. A family that might not need him now. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point wasn't need. Maybe it was about making things right even when right was impossible. About trying even when failure seemed certain. Those girls deserve better than all of us, Bernice said quietly. And they're going to get it. How? She turned back to face him, her husband, the stranger, the coward who'd somehow become her responsibility to fix. I don't know yet, but keeping secrets hasn't worked for anyone. So we start with the truth. All of it. No more hiding. No more pretending. They'll hate me. Probably. Judy will never forgive me. Probably not. You might leave me. Bernice met his eyes. I haven't decided yet. The honesty of that statement hung in the air, because she hadn't decided. Didn't know if this marriage could survive the weight of his lies. Didn't know if she wanted it to. But the twins still didn't know, and telling them would destroy their world. And somehow, Bernice had become the person who had to help pick up the pieces. What do we do now? Daryl asked. Lost. Looking to her for answers she didn't have. Now you write them a letter, explaining who you are, what happened, why you weren't there, and you let them decide if they want to meet you. Because this isn't about forcing your way into their lives. It's about giving them a choice you never gave Judy. And if they say no, then you respect that, and you try again later, and you keep trying until they're ready, or until they're not. Either way, you show up. That's what fathers do. They show up. Daryl nodded, slowly, like each movement took effort. I'm sorry, he said, for lying to you, for putting you in this position, for all of it. I know. Can you forgive me? Bernice looked at him, really looked at him, saw the man she'd married, and the stranger he'd always been underneath. I don't know, she said. Ask me again when this is over. She left him in his study, with the darkness and his whiskey and his regrets. Walked through their house that suddenly felt like a museum of false memories. Every photo on the wall a lie. Every moment they'd shared tainted by the truth he'd been hiding. Maybe this could be fixed. Maybe Daryl could somehow become the father Rita and Alma deserved. Maybe Judy could find peace. Maybe Bernice could figure out how to rebuild a life that had been built on lies. Maybe. But tonight, she just felt tired. Tired of secrets. Tired of pretending. Tired of being the only person trying to hold together a family that had been broken before she even knew it existed. She went to bed alone, in the guest room, because sharing space with Daryl felt impossible. And somewhere across the street, two little girls slept, without knowing their entire world was about to change. Bernice thought she could control how the truth came out. She was wrong. Because 3 days later, 10-year-old Alma got bullied at school, and everything Bernice planned went out the window. It started on the playground during lunch recess. Alma was standing near the swings when 3 older kids circled her. The ringleader, a 6th grade boy with a cruel smile, said something that made his friends laugh. Then he pushed, not hard enough to be seen by the teachers on duty, just hard enough to make Alma stumble. She caught herself, tried to walk away. That's when he said it, loud enough for everyone to hear. Where's your dad, Alma? Oh, wait, you don't have one. You're the girl with no dad. More laughter, cruel, pointed. The kind that follows you home and echoes in your head at night. Alma's face crumpled. She ran. By the time Rita found her sister in the bathroom, Alma was sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper than hurt feelings. From the place where shame lives. Where all the questions you've been too afraid to ask finally break through. The school called Judy at 1:47 p.m. Mrs. Hudson, this is Oak Ridge Elementary. There's been an incident involving Alma. Nothing physical, but she's very upset. Can you come pick her up? Bernice was in her garden when she heard it, The sound of Judy's voice breaking, desperate, frantic. Sound travels between houses on Hawthorne Lane, especially when windows are open and someone is crying hard enough not to care who hears. "I'm on my way," Judy was saying. "Tell her I'm coming. Please, just tell her I'm coming." Bernice stood up, dirt on her knees, gardening gloves still on. She looked toward number 52. Saw Judy rush out the front door, car keys in hand, face already wet with tears. Something in Bernice's chest pulled tight. She didn't think, just moved, grabbed her own keys, got in her car, and drove to Oak Ridge Elementary. She arrived first, by 3 minutes. The office was exactly as she remembered it from her first visit. Same squeaky door, same fluorescent lights humming overhead, same smell of laminated hall passes and industrial cleaner. But this time, through the window of the nurse's office, she could see Alma, curled up on the vinyl couch, face red and swollen, shoulders shaking. "I'm here for Alma Martin," Bernice said to the receptionist, the same woman who'd helped her before. "I'm family." The receptionist hesitated. "Her mother is on the way. I know, but I'm here now, and she needs someone now." Something in Bernice's voice must have convinced her, because she nodded, pressed the buzzer that unlocked the door to the back offices. Bernice walked into the nurse's office. Alma looked up, eyes wide, confused. "Miss Bernice." Bernice sat down on the couch, pulled the sobbing girl into her arms. Alma resisted for exactly 2 seconds, then collapsed into her, crying harder, holding on like Bernice was the only solid thing in a world that had just proven itself cruel. "Why did you come?" Alma whispered against her shoulder. Bernice held her tighter. "Because you're family." By the time Judy arrived 10 minutes later, Bernice had already spoken to the principal, already gotten the names of the boys involved, already insisted on calling their parents, already made it clear that this would not happen again. "Mrs. Martin," the principal started. "It's Hudson," Judy corrected, voice tight. "And this is my cousin, Bernice Martin." The principal looked between them, confused by the logistics but too polite to ask. "The boys have been disciplined," Bernice said, voice steady, controlled. "And I've spoken with their parents. If anything like this happens again, I expect immediate action. Not a phone call after the fact. Immediate action." Judy stared at her, grateful, shocked, still trying to catch up. The office door burst open. "Rita?" She'd been searching the school for her sister. When she saw Alma safe in Bernice's arms, her face softened with relief. Then her eyes narrowed, focused on Bernice, studying her. "Are you our aunt?" Rita asked. The question hung in the air, suspended between truth and lies, between the secret they'd all been keeping and the moment it finally broke open. Bernice met Judy's eyes, asking permission. Judy gave the smallest nod. "Yes," Bernice said. "I am." Rita's face transformed, not quite a smile, but something like understanding, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew we were related somehow." From that moment, everything shifted. The next day there was a knock on Bernice's door, at 4:15. She opened it to find Rita and Alma standing on her porch, backpacks still on, nervous but determined. "Can we come in?" Rita asked. "We have math homework, and Mom's at work, and we thought maybe you could help?" Bernice looked past them, across the street. Judy stood in her doorway, watching. She gave Bernice a small nod. Permission, or maybe surrender. "Of course," Bernice said. "Come in." They sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she and Daryl ate silent dinners, the same table where he'd lied to her face. But now it held something different. 2 little girls with homework and questions and a hunger for connection they didn't know how to name. Upstairs, Daryl watched from the window of his study. Bernice could feel his presence, his cowardice. He wanted to come down, wanted to meet them, but fear kept him frozen. Let him watch, Bernice thought. Let him see what he's been missing. The visits became routine, almost every day after school, sometimes for homework help, sometimes just to talk, sometimes because Bernice had baked cookies and somehow they always knew. Rita was the cautious one, testing, probing, making sure Bernice was safe before fully trusting. Alma was more open, quicker to hug, desperate for the kind of attention that comes from someone who chooses you, not someone obligated by blood. Judy allowed it, reluctantly at first, then with visible relief. Like Bernice showing up had lifted a weight she'd been carrying alone for too long. But the twins were smart, and they were starting to ask questions Bernice couldn't answer. It happened on a Wednesday. Rita was coloring at Bernice's kitchen table while Alma played in the living room. Something simple, peaceful, the kind of moment that felt almost normal. Then Rita looked up, her brown eyes, Daryl's eyes, fixed on Bernice with an intensity that made Bernice's heart stutter. "Miss Bernice, do you know our dad?" The crayon in Bernice's hand froze midway across the page she'd been coloring with Rita. Time seemed to stop. The kitchen clock ticked too loud. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed. Normal sounds in a moment that was anything but. "Why do you ask?" Bernice managed. "Careful, steady." Rita's gaze didn't waver. "Because you and Mr. Martin are married, and Mom gets weird when his name comes up." Silence. In the living room, Alma had stopped playing, listening. Rita continued, voice small but determined. "I think there's something nobody's telling us. Children have a way of seeing through the lies adults tell to protect them or ourselves. And sometimes they ask the questions we're most afraid to answer. If this story is pulling at something in you, if you're thinking about a truth you've been holding or a question you've been avoiding, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because these stories matter most when they're not just watched, but shared, when they become conversations that change things. Bernice's hands started to shake. Rita's small hand reached out, touched hers. The gesture so trusting, it made Bernice want to cry. "I can't answer that, sweetheart," Bernice said. "That's something your mom needs to tell you." "When?" "Soon, I promise. Soon." Rita studied her face, reading the truth in what Bernice couldn't say. "It's him, isn't it?" Rita whispered. "Mr. Martin, he's our dad." Bernice's breath caught. "Talk to your mom," she said. "Please, just talk to your mom." That night, the twins came home from Bernice's house with more questions than they'd left with. Questions that had been building for years, questions that couldn't be deflected anymore. "Mom, who's our dad?" Rita asked. No preamble, no lead-up. Just the question that had been burning in her for 10 years. Judy froze, dish towel in hand, standing at the sink. The moment she'd been dreading finally arrived. "Why are you asking?" "Because we're not stupid," Rita said. "Because Miss Bernice acts weird when we mention Mr. Martin. Because you act weird when we mention him. Because we look like him. We have his eyes, his smile. Everyone says so when they see old photos of him online." "You've been looking him up?" "Of course we have." Rita's voice cracked. "We wanted to know what our father looked like. And then we figured out he lives one street away. And you never told us?" Alma started crying. Quiet. The kind of crying that comes from having your worst fear confirmed. "I was going to tell you," Judy said, desperate. "I was waiting for the right time." "When?" Rita shouted. "When we're 20? 30? When he's dead?" "Rita, just tell us the truth." Judy's resolve shattered. She sank into a chair, and she told them. Everything. The temp job, the relationship, the abandonment, the unanswered calls, The move to Hawthorne Lane. All of it. When she finished, both girls were crying. "I want to see the birth certificates," Rita said, voice shaking. "I want proof." "Rita, maybe we should wait." "Now, Mom, I need to see them now." What happened next would force everyone's hand. Judy led them to her bedroom, pulled open the bottom drawer of her dresser, the one that held important documents, birth certificates, social security cards, the paper trail of their lives. She handed each girl their birth certificate. Official, legal, undeniable. Certificate of live birth, State of California. Child's name, Rita Marie Martin. Father, Darrell James. Martin, Certificate of live birth, State of California. Child's name, Alma Rose Martin. Father, Darrell James. "Martin," Rita screamed, a sound of pure anguish that echoed through the house and carried across to number 47, where Bernice heard it and knew the secret had finally, completely exploded. Alma went silent, staring at the paper in her hands, at her father's name typed in official lettering. Proof that he'd known, that he'd signed the paperwork, that he'd acknowledged them legally while ignoring them in every other way that mattered. "He knew," Rita said, voice breaking. "He knew we existed, and he never came. He lives one street away, and he never came." Judy reached for them. Both girls pulled away. "We need to see him," Alma whispered. "We need to talk to him." "I don't think now, Mom." Rita's face was streaked with tears, but her voice was steel. "We're going over there right now, and he's going to tell us why. He's going to explain why his name is on our birth certificates, but he was never in our lives." The secret that had been carefully contained for 11 years shattered in an instant, and there was no putting it back together. Rita's scream could be heard 3 houses down. By the time Bernice reached Judy's front door, both girls knew the truth, and their entire world had shattered. The door was unlocked. Bernice walked in without knocking because the sound of that scream, raw and animal and broken, made politeness irrelevant. Papers were scattered across the living room floor. Birth certificates, school records, old photos. The documentary evidence of lives lived in parallel. Rita stood in the center of the chaos, chest heaving, face wet with tears and rage. Judy sat crumpled on the couch, sobbing into her hands. And Alma was frozen by the window, staring at the birth certificate in her hands like it was written in a language she couldn't understand. "You lied to us," Rita screamed at her mother. Not the careful, polite Rita who did her homework at Bernice's kitchen table. This was something primal, a child whose trust had been shattered. "I was protecting you," Judy choked out between sobs. "From what? From having a dad?" Rita's voice cracked. "From knowing that our father lives one street away? That he's been here the whole time and just didn't care enough to find us. It's not that simple." "It is that simple. He knew about us. His name is right here." Rita shook the birth certificate. "Darrell James Martin, father. He signed this. He knew we existed, and he never came." Alma's silence was worse than Rita's rage. She just stood there, paper trembling in her hands, tears sliding down her cheeks without sound, like she'd gone somewhere inside herself where the hurt couldn't quite reach yet. Bernice stepped fully into the room. All 3 of them turned to look at her. "Did you know?" Rita asked, voice sharp, accusing. Bernice met her eyes, didn't flinch. "I found out 4 days ago." 4 days? Rita's face crumpled. "Everyone knew but us. Everyone. You, Mom, him. Everyone knew, and nobody told us." "I wanted to tell you," Bernice said, "but it wasn't my truth to tell. It was your mother's, and his." "His!" Rita spat the word. "You mean our father, Darrell Martin, your husband, the man who lives across the street and walks past us like we're strangers." Judy stood up, tried to reach for Rita. "Sweetheart, don't." Rita stepped back. Don't touch me right now. Alma finally spoke, her voice so quiet they all had to strain to hear it. I want to see him. Alma, Judy started. I want to see him, Alma repeated, louder this time. I want him to look at us and explain why he didn't want us. He doesn't get to just walk in now, Judy said, voice fierce, protective. After 11 years, he doesn't get to suddenly decide he wants to be a father. He's our father, Rita said, whether he acted like it or not, and we deserve answers. Not from you, from him. The twins looked at each other, some silent communication that only sisters share. Then both turned to Bernice. Can you call him? Alma asked. Please? We know you're married to him. We know you can make him come here. Bernice pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady, even though her heart was racing. She dialed Daryl. He answered on the first ring. Bernice, they know, and they want to meet you. Tonight. Silence on the other end. She could hear him breathing, could almost hear him calculating, weighing options, looking for escape routes. There are no escape routes this time, Bernice said quietly. You're going to come to Judy's house. You're going to look your daughters in the face, and you're going to tell them the truth. All of it. I don't know if I can. You don't have a choice anymore. They deserve this. They've deserved it for 11 years. So you're going to find the courage you should have had a decade ago, and you're going to be here in 30 minutes. She hung up. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. Judy paced. Rita sat rigid on the couch, arms crossed. Alma stood by the window, watching the street, waiting. Bernice stayed because the twins had asked her to. Because somehow, in the chaos of this moment, she'd become the one solid thing they could hold on to. What if he doesn't come? Alma whispered. He'll come, Bernice said, and meant it, because whatever else Daryl was, coward, liar, absent father, he knew this was the moment that would define the rest of his life. Come or don't come. Face it or run. There would be no third chance. At exactly 31 minutes, the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Judy moved to answer it. Her hand shook as she reached for the doorknob. When she opened the door, Daryl stood there, stripped of every bit of billionaire confidence. No expensive suit, no practiced smile. Just a man facing his failures, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, looking smaller than Bernice had ever seen him. His eyes went immediately to the twins, and something in his face broke, because they looked like him. The resemblance that Bernice had seen from the beginning was undeniable up close. Same eyes, same dimples, same slight tilt of the head. These were his daughters, and he'd missed every moment of their becoming. Come in, Judy said, voice flat, empty of emotion. Daryl stepped inside. The door closed behind him with a click that sounded like a cell door locking. Rita and Alma stared at him. He stared back. 10 years of absence compressed into this single moment. Then Daryl did something unexpected. He knelt, not sitting down, kneeling, making himself physically lower than them. A gesture of vulnerability, of submission, of acknowledging that he had no power here, no right to stand above them. I'm sorry, he said. The words hung in the air. Insufficient. Too small for the hurt they were trying to cover. Rita's face twisted. That's it? That's all you have to say? I'm sorry? No. Daryl's voice cracked. There aren't enough words. There's no apology big enough for what I did. For what I didn't do. Why didn't you come? Rita asked. The question that had been building for 11 years. Daryl looked at her. Really looked at her. Because I was scared. And that's not good enough. But it's the truth. Scared of what? Rita demanded. Scared of us? Scared of being a father. Scared of failing. scared of looking at you and seeing all the ways I'd already let you down." He swallowed hard. "I told myself I was waiting for the right time, that I'd reach out when I was ready. But the truth is, I was never going to be ready. So I just didn't. And every day I didn't became another day I couldn't, until it felt impossible." Alma stepped forward, the quiet one, the one who'd been watching and listening and holding everything inside. She looked at Daryl with those amber eyes, his eyes, and asked the question that destroyed him. "Why didn't you look harder?" Daryl had no answer. His mouth opened, closed. No words came. Because there was no good answer. No explanation that would justify hiring investigators for 3 years while his daughters lived one street away. The girls didn't hug him, didn't forgive him, just stared, waiting for something that would make this make sense, something that would explain how a father could know his children existed and choose not to find them. "You don't get to decide you're our dad now," Rita said, voice hard, protective of herself and her sister. "You're right, I don't. But I'm asking permission to try." "Why should we let you?" "Because I'm asking, not demanding, not expecting, just asking. And if you say no, I'll respect that. But if you give me a chance, even the smallest chance, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the father I should have been from the beginning. This is the moment everything either breaks forever or starts to heal." Rita looked at Alma. Alma looked at Rita. Some silent conversation happening in the space between them. Years of being each other's only constant, of surviving without a father, of not needing him because they had each other. Did they need him now? Want him? They didn't know. Alma finally spoke, voice small but steady. "Can we think about it?" Relief flooded Daryl's face. Not happiness, just relief that the door hadn't slammed completely shut. "Take all the time you need." He stood up slowly, looked at Judy. "I'm sorry, to you too, for everything." Judy nodded. Once, couldn't manage words. Daryl walked to the door, his hand on the knob. He turned back one more time. "You're both beautiful, and smart, and brave, and I missed all of it. That's my failure, my loss, not yours." Then he left. The door closed. The silence that followed was deafening. Rita turned to Bernice. "Will you stay?" "I'm not going anywhere," Bernice said, and she didn't. She stayed while Judy held both girls, and all 3 of them cried. Stayed while Rita asked questions nobody could fully answer. Stayed while Alma processed in silence. Stayed because these girls, who were technically nothing to her, had somehow become everything. Hours later, after the twins had finally fallen asleep on the couch, Bernice and Judy sat in the kitchen, coffee cold between them, just like the first time they'd had this conversation. Except now the secret was out, the truth exposed, and somehow they were on the same side. "Thank you," Judy whispered, "for staying, for being here, for all of it." "They're family," Bernice said simply. "Your family. That matters." "Are you going to leave him?" Bernice looked out the window toward her house, where Daryl was probably sitting in the dark, replaying every moment, every word, every look on his daughters' faces. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, "but I know I'm staying for them. Whatever else happens, Rita and Alma need someone who's going to show up. And I can do that." An alliance was forming, not the one any of them expected, but the one they needed. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of everyone's lives. Because healing doesn't look like the movies. It looks like Alma refusing to speak to Daryl for days, then asking him one question about his childhood. It looks like Rita testing him constantly to see if he'll leave again. And it looks like Bernice and Judy learning to exist in the same space without shattering. Week 1 was silence. Daryl sent a letter, handwritten, 6 pages of apologies and explanations, and attempts to make sense of the senseless. He dropped it in Judy's mailbox at dawn, before anyone could see him, before he could second-guess himself into paralysis again. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days. Rita walked past it like it didn't exist. Alma stared at it every morning over breakfast, but never touched it. "You don't have to read it," Judy told them. "Not until you're ready, or never, if that's what you choose." The letter stayed sealed. Week 2 brought the first crack. Bernice arrived at Judy's house one afternoon to find Alma in the backyard, sitting cross-legged in the grass, the letter open in her lap. Tears streaming down her face. Silent. The kind of crying that comes from reading words that hurt and heal simultaneously. "Did Rita read it?" Bernice asked, sitting down beside her. Alma shook her head. "She says she doesn't care what he has to say." "And you?" "I needed to know." Alma's voice was small, raw. "I needed to hear him say it, that he was sorry, that it wasn't our fault. It was never your fault. I know. But sometimes knowing something in your head isn't the same as believing it in your heart." Alma folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope. She never told anyone what it said, not even Rita. Some conversations, even one-sided ones, are too private to share. Week 3 brought a test. Daryl called Bernice. "Can I ask them to dinner? Is it too soon?" "Ask them yourself." "I don't have Judy's number." "Then maybe you should ask for it." He did. Left a message on Judy's voicemail that evening. Careful, formal. "This is Daryl Martin. I'd like to take Rita and Alma to dinner this week. If they're willing, please let me know." Rita's answer was immediate. "No." Alma hesitated. "Maybe." Maybe was the first opening. Small, tentative, but real. Week 4 brought ice cream instead of dinner. 15 minutes instead of an hour. A public place, the ice cream shop on Main Street, where nothing too emotional could happen because strangers were watching. Bernice came too, the girls insisted, like she was a buffer, a safety net, someone who belonged to both worlds and could translate between them. Daryl arrived early, ordered nothing for himself, just waited. When the twins walked in with Bernice, his face transformed, hope and fear in equal measure. "Hi," he said, too formal, too nervous. "Hi," Alma replied. Rita said nothing, just studied him, looking for cracks, for signs he'd run. They ordered ice cream, sat at a small table. The conversation was stilted, surface level. "What grade are you in? Do you like school? What's your favorite subject?" But Rita was testing him. Bernice could see it, asking questions, then watching to see if he'd remember the answers later, seeing if he'd actually listen or just perform listening. After exactly 15 minutes, Rita stood up. "We should go." Daryl's face fell, but he nodded. "Thank you for coming, both of you." As they left, Alma turned back. "Same time next week?" Daryl's smile was the most genuine thing Bernice had seen on his face in years. "I'd like that." Week 5 brought actual conversation. They met again, same ice cream shop, same table. But this time, Rita asked the first real question. "What do you do?" "For work," Daryl explained. "Investment strategies, market analysis, risk assessment." He tried to make it simple, relatable. Rita listened with the intensity of someone memorizing facts for a test. "Do you like it?" she asked. "I used to. Now I'm not sure." "Why not?" "Because I spent so much time building a business that I forgot to build a life. And by the time I realized what I'd missed everything that mattered." Rita held his gaze. "Is that supposed to make us feel sorry for you?" "No, it's supposed to explain. Not excuse, explain." The distinction mattered. Rita nodded. Once, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Week 6 changed everything. The school showcase invitation came home in Rita's backpack, a flyer on bright yellow paper. Oak Ridge Elementary Family Showcase. Students will perform talents, read poetry, and present projects. Parents and guardians welcome. Special invitation. Fathers encouraged to attend. Rita and Alma stared at that last line. Fathers encouraged to attend. They'd never had a father to invite before. Now they had one who lived one street away, one who was trying, one who they still weren't sure they wanted. Should we invite him? Alma asked. He doesn't deserve it, Rita said immediately. Maybe, but I want him to come. Rita looked at her sister. Why? Because I want to see if he shows up. I want to know if he means it, that he's trying. What if he doesn't come? Then we know. Alma's voice was steady. We know he hasn't changed, and we stop hoping. Rita considered. The test to end all tests. Show up or don't. Choose them or choose comfort. Okay, Rita said finally. But he sits in the back, not with the other parents. He hasn't earned that yet. They needed help writing the invitation. The words felt too big for 10-year-old hands. They came to Bernice. Can you help us? Alma asked. We don't know what to say. They sat at Bernice's kitchen table, the same table where so many moments had unfolded. Bernice handed them paper and pen. Tell me what you want to say, she said. I'll help you put it into words. Rita spoke first. We want him to know he's invited, but also that this doesn't mean everything's okay. And that he has to sit in the back, Alma added, because he's not like the other dads yet. And that if he doesn't come, we'll never forgive him, Rita finished. Bernice wrote their words in her careful handwriting, their sentiment wrapped in adult syntax. Mr. Martin, we have a school showcase on Thursday at 6 p.m. You're invited if you want to come. Please sit in the back row. We're not ready for you to sit with us yet. If you don't come, don't try again. Rita and Alma Simple. Honest. The boundary and the threat clear. Darryl received it at work. His assistant brought it to him during a board meeting. He excused himself, walked to his office, closed the door, and broke down completely. Parallel to the slow reconstruction happening between Darryl and his daughters, something else was healing. Something Bernice hadn't expected. Her relationship with Judy. It happened late one night, week 4. Bernice couldn't sleep. She saw the light on at number 52. Walked across the street in her pajamas and knocked. Judy opened the door, surprised. Is everything okay? Can we talk? They sat in Judy's kitchen, the place where so many truths had been told. Coffee between them, actually hot this time, actually drunk. I hated you, Judy said, suddenly. The words spilling out like she'd been holding them in for years. Because you got the life I didn't. Bernice nodded. And I hated you because you knew my husband in a way I never will. Both women looked at each other, then simultaneously started crying. Not delicate tears, ugly, broken sobs, years of resentment and hurt and jealousy finally released. I should have told you when you got engaged, Judy said. I should have reached out years ago, Bernice replied. I was scared you'd hate me. I was scared you were right to disappear. They cried together, apologized together, broke and rebuilt together in that small kitchen, while their coffee went cold again. They didn't become best friends, but they became family again. The showcase was in 3 days, and nobody knew if this fragile beginning would survive it. What happened at that showcase would determine everything. Darryl cleared his schedule, turned down meetings, made it clear to everyone that Thursday evening was non-negotiable. He would be at Oak Ridge Elementary, in the back row, watching his daughters perform, or he would lose them forever. The twins prepared. Rita worked on her science presentation. Alma wrote a poem, something about family and roots and belonging. She wouldn't let anyone read it before the showcase. "It's a surprise," she said. "You'll hear it when everyone else does." The night before the showcase, Bernice stopped by Judy's house, found Alma in the living room, practicing her poem, reading it aloud to empty chairs, getting the rhythm right, making sure her voice wouldn't shake when it mattered. Bernice sat quietly, listening, and when Alma reached the last line, Bernice's breath caught. "Family isn't who you're born to, it's who shows up." Alma looked directly at Bernice when she said it, not at the empty chairs, at Bernice, the woman who wasn't her mother, or her aunt, or her stepmother, but had somehow become all of those things anyway. Alma's performance would leave everyone in tears, for reasons nobody expected. Tomorrow would either break this fragile family or begin to make it whole, and everyone knew it. Thursday evening, 6:00 p.m. Darryl stood outside the school auditorium, hands shaking, wondering if he had the right to walk through those doors. Bernice found him there. "You don't get to run again," she said. "Not from this." So he went inside. The auditorium was filled with families, parents and grandparents and siblings, crowding into rows of folding chairs. The air smelled like school, floor wax and old textbooks, and the anticipation of children about to perform. Stage lights illuminated the small platform at the front, where a microphone stood waiting. Darryl walked down the center aisle. Every step felt like judgment. Parents glanced at him, the man in the expensive watch and tailored shirt walking alone, not sitting with his family, not belonging anywhere. He found the back row, sat down in the corner seat, as instructed, as far from the stage as the room allowed. Other fathers sat up front with their daughters, proud, comfortable, men who'd earned their place through years of showing up, birthday parties and soccer games and homework help and bedtime stories. Men who knew their daughters' favorite colors and biggest fears and secret dreams. Darryl knew none of those things. Rita entered from the side door with her class. She scanned the audience, found him in the back. Her face was unreadable, not angry, not pleased, just watching, noting that he'd come, that he'd kept his word. Alma came in next. When she spotted Darryl, she gave the smallest nod. Acknowledgement, permission. She'd invited him, and he'd shown up. That was something. The principal welcomed everyone, talked about student achievement and the importance of family support. Bernice slipped into the seat beside Darryl. Judy sat 3 rows ahead, alone, refusing to sit in the back like an afterthought. The performances began. A 3rd grader played violin, shaky but sincere. A 5th grader performed a magic trick that didn't quite work, but earned applause anyway. A 6th grader sang off-key, but with confidence. Then Rita was called to the stage. She walked up carrying a poster board, steady, prepared. Set up her display with the precision of someone who'd rehearsed this 100 times. "My presentation is about genetics and inherited traits," she announced, voice clear, scientific. She displayed photos, side-by-side comparisons, herself, Alma, and Darryl. The auditorium went completely silent. "These are my eyes," Rita said, pointing to the first set of photos. "From my father, who I just met 6 weeks ago." People turned to look at Darryl. He felt their stares like physical weight. Rita continued, clinical and detached. "Eye color is determined by multiple genes. The amount of melanin in the iris creates different shades. My sister and I both inherited the same genetic markers from our father. Same amber flecks. Same slight downturn at the outer corners." She moved to the next section. "Dimples are a dominant genetic trait. Both my sister and I have them, from our father." Her voice never wavered. Facts delivered like she was discussing fruit flies instead of the man who'd abandoned her. "Genetics don't make you a parent," Rita said. looking directly at the audience, not at Daryl, never at Daryl. Biology creates similarities, but parenting is a choice. It's showing up, being present. Genetics might be where we start, but maybe, just maybe, they're only a start. She gathered her poster, walked off the stage, sat down with her class, didn't look back at the man in the back row who was crying silent tears into his hands. But she'd acknowledged him publicly, given him the title he'd never earned. Father, not in anger. In fact, he existed. He was her father, and the whole world now knew it. 3 more performances passed. Daryl heard none of them. He was still processing what Rita had done. The gift and the knife she'd handed him simultaneously. Acknowledgement without forgiveness. Fact without emotion. Then Alma was called to the stage. She walked slowly, paper trembling in her hands, stood in front of the microphone, and had to adjust it down to her height. The screech of metal on metal made people wince. "I wrote a poem," Alma said, voice small at first. "It's called The Family Tree." She unfolded her paper, took a breath, and began. "Some trees grow tall and straight from seeds, planted with intention, tended with care, roots that sink deep into fertile ground. Branches that know exactly where they're going, but some trees start in rocky soil. Seeds carried by wind, landing sideways, taking root in the cracks between stones, growing despite everything." Her voice grew stronger. "Some roots grow late, but grow deep anyway. Some branches break, but learn to heal. Some trees look different than the forest around them, but they're still trees, still reaching, still growing." People in the audience started to understand this wasn't just about trees. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up, who stays, who tries, even when they're scared, who waters the roots when the soil is dry, who holds the branches when the wind gets strong. Alma looked up from her paper, found Daryl in the back row, held his gaze. Maybe we're all just learning how to be family. Maybe some of us start late. Maybe some of us get it wrong before we get it right. But maybe that's okay, because family isn't about perfect. It's about showing up and trying, and showing up again. The last line hung in the air like a benediction. Tears streamed down Daryl's face. He didn't wipe them away, didn't try to hide them, just let them fall while his daughter, who was giving him grace he didn't deserve, looked at him with understanding that went deeper than her 10 years should allow. The audience erupted in applause. Alma folded her paper carefully, started to walk back to her seat with the other students. But halfway down the steps, she stopped, changed direction. She walked past the front rows, past the proud fathers sitting with their families, all the way to the back. She stood in front of Daryl, small, brave, looking up at the man who'd given her his eyes and his dimples, but nothing else until 6 weeks ago. "You can sit with us next time," she whispered. Daryl broke completely, collapsed forward, sobbing openly now. The kind of crying that comes from shame and hope and redemption all mixed together. Alma hesitated, then placed one small hand on his shoulder, just for a moment, then returned to her seat. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones struggling hardest with their own failures. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, grace looks like giving someone permission to try again. If this story moved you, if Alma's words about family hit something deep, take a second and hit that like button. Not for us, but as a way of saying, I see this, I feel this, and these stories about complicated, messy, real families matter. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, stories that don't have perfect endings, but have honest ones, share this video. Because that's how we change the conversation about what family can look like. After the showcase, Families spilled into the parking lot, kids running, parents chatting, the normal chaos of a school event ending. Daryl stood by his car, unsure what to do, unsure if he should approach or wait, unsure of everything except that he'd witnessed something miraculous. His daughters giving him a chance he'd never earned. Rita and Alma walked out with Judy. The three of them, the family unit that had survived without him. When they saw Daryl, they stopped. For a moment, no one moved. Then Bernice appeared, walked to Daryl, then to the twins, creating a bridge between the two halves of this broken family. Rita's project needs to get home safely, Bernice said, practical. Giving everyone something to focus on besides the emotion. Daryl moved forward, carefully. Can I carry it to your car? Rita looked at her mother. Judy nodded. Okay, Rita said. Such a small word, but it meant everything. Daryl carried Rita's poster board to Judy's car. Alma walked beside him. Bernice held Alma's other hand. Judy followed with Rita, the five of them together for the first time publicly. No grand declarations, no speeches. Just the practical act of transporting a science project from auditorium to parking lot. Judy opened her trunk. Daryl carefully placed the poster board inside. Thank you, Rita said stiffly, for coming. Thank you for inviting me. Alma pulled out her phone, the cheap one Judy had gotten her for emergencies. Can we take a picture? Everyone froze. All of us? Judy asked. All of us. They stood together in the parking lot, awkward, uncertain about where to position themselves. Finally settling on Judy and Daryl on the ends, the twins in the middle, Bernice slightly behind them, like she wasn't sure she belonged in the frame. Judy held up her phone. Set the timer. 10 seconds. They had 10 seconds to look like something resembling a family. The flash went off. When they looked at the photo, nobody was smiling perfectly. Rita looked skeptical. Daryl looked hopeful. Alma looked peaceful. Bernice looked uncertain. Judy looked tired. But they were all there, together, in the same frame. This is weird, Rita said. Everyone nodded. Agreed. But it's our weird, Alma added. They got into their separate cars. Judy, Rita, and Alma in one. Daryl in another. Bernice in a third. 3 cars pulling out of the parking lot, headed in the same direction. Toward Hawthorne Lane. Toward home. 1 year ago, none of them could have imagined this moment. But here they were. Not perfect, not healed, but together. And sometimes, that's the beginning of everything. 1 year after that school showcase, Hawthorne Lane looked exactly the same to anyone driving by. Identical brick houses, trimmed hedges, the illusion of ordinary lives. But for the people living at numbers 47 and 52, everything had changed. The twins were 11 now. Rita had grown 2 inches and finally needed the glasses she'd been squinting without for months. Alma had cut her hair short, a declaration of independence that made Judy cry and then laugh at herself for crying over hair. They split time between houses now. Weekdays with Judy at number 52. Weekends alternating between their mother's house and supervised visits with Daryl. Not because a court ordered it, but because they'd all sat down together and figured out what felt right, what felt fair. It took 8 months, but the twins finally called him Dad. Not Daryl or Mr. Martin or our father, just Dad. Casual, like it had always been that way. The first time Rita said it, Dad, can you help me with this math problem? Daryl had to leave the room. Came back 5 minutes. Later with red eyes and no explanation. They all pretended not to notice. They still called Bernice, Miss Bernice. Her choice. I'm not replacing your mom, she'd told them early on. I'm just extra. The bonus adult who shows up with cookies and terrible advice about boys. Rita was warming slowly, still testing, still watching to see if Daryl would leave again, still braced for disappointment, even as she let herself hope. Alma's heart was more open. She'd inherited Judy's capacity for forgiveness and none of her caution. She hugged freely now, laughed without holding back. Believed people when they said they'd stay. Both girls were in therapy, processing abandonment and reunion, and the complicated feelings that came with loving someone who'd hurt you. Their therapist said they were doing remarkably well. That resilience looked like this: broken pieces learning to fit together in new configurations. School friends knew the story now, not because the twins hid it anymore, but because they'd stopped trying to explain away the absence. "My dad wasn't around when I was little," Rita would say matter-of-factly, "but he's here now. People make mistakes." Simple, honest, moving forward. Judy had changed too. She'd gone back to school, nights and weekends, while the twins were with Daryl or Bernice. Finishing the degree she'd abandoned when pregnancy made everything else impossible. Business administration. Not glamorous, but practical. Something that would give her options she'd never had before. When Daryl offered financial help, she'd almost said no. Pride nearly won. But then she thought about Rita and Alma, about the example she wanted to set, about the difference between accepting what was owed and accepting what wasn't earned. "It's for them, not me," she'd told him. The condition that made it acceptable. Education fund, emergency savings, things they need, not things to make you feel less guilty. He'd agreed. Set up accounts in their names. Made it official, legal, nothing he could take back. Her relationship with Bernice was still complicated but functional. They'd never be best friends. Too much history, too much hurt. But they were something better than friends. They were family who'd chosen each other despite everything. And Judy had started dating someone new. A teacher from the community college. Kind, steady. Someone who knew her story and didn't run from it. The twins had met him once. Alma approved. Rita was skeptical, but softening. "Your dad and I were never meant to be," Judy told the twins one night when they asked if she still loved Daryl. "But you two were meant to be everything." Daryl had stepped back from 60% of his business obligations, sold off companies, delegated responsibilities, made it clear to everyone that his priorities had shifted. He attended every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game and dance recital and science fair. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because he was learning that showing up was the only currency that mattered. He'd set up education trusts for the twins. More money than they'd ever need. Not to buy their love. He knew better now. But to ensure they'd never struggle the way Judy had. Never have to choose between dreams and survival. He was in therapy too. Addressing why I ran with a therapist who didn't let him hide behind excuses. Learning that fear was real, but not justification. That he'd hurt people and needed to live with that while still moving forward. His marriage with Bernice was forever altered but not destroyed. They still lived in the same house, still attended family dinners together, still functioned as a unit when it came to the twins. But the romance was gone. Maybe it had never really been there, just the illusion of it, built on secrets and selective honesty. Bernice had become the unexpected center that held everyone together. She was the one the twins called when they needed to talk about something but weren't sure who to tell. The one who drove them to therapy appointments and waited in the parking lot reading terrible romance novels. The one who showed up at Judy's house with groceries when she knew money was tight before financial aid came through. She'd become their advocate, confidant, second mother figure, without trying to be anyone's mother. Her relationship with Daryl was honest, but distant. They slept in separate rooms now. Had for months. Not with anger, just with acknowledgement that what they'd had was built on lies, and what they had now was something different, something undefined. They were deciding whether to stay married or redefine their relationship. The paperwork sat on the kitchen counter. Divorce forms, half filled. Neither of them quite ready to sign, but neither pretending the marriage was what it had been. Bernice was finding purpose she didn't know she needed. In being the person who showed up. In creating family where biology and law said she had no obligation. In choosing connection over comfort. They had dinner together every Sunday now, all 5 of them. Sometimes at Judy's house, sometimes at Bernice's. Never at a restaurant, too public, too many eyes on their unconventional family unit. This Sunday, they gathered at Bernice's. The dining room table that used to host silent meals, now crowded with voices talking over each other. Rita complaining about a teacher. Alma excited about an art project. Judy sharing a funny story from class. Daryl asking questions and actually listening to the answers. Bernice watched from the kitchen doorway. This chaotic, messy, imperfect thing they'd built from broken pieces. Halfway through dinner, Alma asked the question nobody saw coming. "Miss Bernice, do you wish you never found out?" Everyone froze. Forks suspended. Conversation stopped. The question hung in the air like a held breath. Bernice set down her water glass carefully. Considered. "I wish I'd known differently," she said finally. "I wish I'd known before I married your dad. I wish the truth hadn't been hidden for so long. But I don't wish I didn't know, because not knowing meant I didn't know you. And knowing you is the best thing that came from all of this." Rita's eyes glistened. She looked down at her plate. Then she asked the other question, the one they'd all been avoiding. "Are you and Dad going to get divorced?" Daryl and Bernice exchanged a look. Years of marriage compressed into one glance. All the hurt and lies and attempts at rebuilding visible in their eyes. "We're figuring that out," Bernice said, voice steady. "But here's what won't change. We're all family now, however that looks." Alma processed this. Then, "So we might have divorced parents and a complicated family tree?" "Basically," Daryl said. Rita snorted. "We're basically a TV show." Everyone laughed. Real laughter. The kind that releases tension and acknowledges absurdity. The kind that says, yes, this is weird, and yes, we're okay with that. After dinner, Bernice walked the twins back to Judy's house, just across the street, but the ritual mattered. The few minutes of just the 3 of them. Alma held her hand. Rita walked slightly ahead, but close enough to still be part of the unit. At Judy's door, Rita turned back. "Thanks for showing up." Simple words, enormous meaning. "Thanks for letting me," Bernice replied. She walked back to number 47. Found Daryl on the porch, sitting on the steps, looking at the stars. She sat beside him, not touching, just present. "We should talk," he said. "Yeah." They talked about their future, not with anger or recrimination, just with honesty. They weren't staying together as romantic partners. They both knew that now. But they weren't enemies either. "We're family, just differently than we planned," Bernice said. Daryl nodded. "I'll move out, get a place nearby, close enough for the twins, far enough to give you space. You don't have to leave Hawthorne, Lane. I know, but maybe it's time. Maybe we all need the distance to figure out what we're becoming." Bernice looked toward number 52. Lights on in the windows. Judy and the twins visible through the glass, living their lives, building their future. "She's lost the illusion of a perfect marriage," Daryl said, "and I'm sorry for that." "Don't be. Bernice's voice was firm. That illusion was suffocating. She gestured to the street, to the houses, to the complicated web of relationships they'd built. This is real, and real is better. Later that night, Bernice sat alone in her house. Lights on at both 47 and 52. 2 houses, 1 street. A family that made no sense on paper, but somehow worked in practice. She'd lost the illusion of a perfect marriage. But she'd gained something rarer. Truth. And a family she chose. Not the family she'd planned for. Not the neat nuclear unit that fit into social expectations, but a family nonetheless. Messy and complicated and real. Hawthorne Lane still looked ordinary. But Bernice Hudson learned that the most extraordinary things often hide in plain sight. 2 girls she was meant to know. A truth she was meant to find. And a family that was broken, but learning, slowly, to build itself into something new. Not perfect, not what anyone planned, but real. And sometimes, that's enough. Rita and Dalma are now 12. They're thriving. Bernice and Daryl, legally separated, but remain co-parents to the twins. Judy graduated with honors. And every Sunday, they all have dinner together, because family isn't about perfect. It's about showing up.